My wife left me for her college ex-lover, and even my daughter started calling him her fairy tale dad. But then, I vanished quietly, and what followed left them both speechless. My name is Austin Reeves, and if you saw me at a backyard barbecue or dropping my kid off at school, you'd probably think I had my together. Hell, I thought I had my together too. Aerospace engineer with a defense contract that paid well enough to keep the wolves from the door. Married to a gorgeous veterinarian for 16 years and father to Mia, my 14-year-old daughter who's smarter than both her parents combined and isn't afraid to remind us of that fact on a daily basis. From the outside looking in, we were living the American dream on steroids. Picture-perfect two-story colonial in the suburbs with the kind of lawn that makes neighbors passive-aggressively competitive about their landscaping. 2 cars in the driveway, her BMW that she insisted was practical, and my reliable Ford F-1150 that actually was practical. Natasha's veterinary clinic was booming because apparently every soccer mom within a 50-mile radius needed someone to tell them their designer dog wasn't actually dying from eating too many organic treats. And me? I was pulling in steady 6 figures designing components for aircraft that I couldn't even talk about at parties without having to kill everyone afterward. You know, the usual government contractor gig. But here's the thing about perfect lives. They're like those Instagram photos where everything looks amazing until you zoom in and notice the mess shoved just out of frame. And brother, was there a mess brewing in the Reeves household that would make a reality TV producer weep tears of joy? Natasha had been getting restless, and I mean restless in that way that makes a man start checking his life insurance policy and wondering if his wife's been Googling how to make poisoning look like food poisoning. Not that I actually thought she wanted to kill me. She's way too squeamish for that. She can barely handle putting down a terminally ill hamster without crying for an hour. But there was definitely something shifting in our house, like tectonic plates getting ready to take impromptu weekend trips to wine country, sign up for pottery classes that she'd quit after 2 sessions, and redecorate the living room every 6 months because the current setup didn't spark joy, or whatever Marie Kondo she'd absorbed from her book club friends. Don't get me wrong, I'm not some fun-hating robot who thinks excitement is a dirty word. I just happen to believe that excitement should come after you've handled your responsibilities, not instead of them. Call me old-fashioned, but I think there's something to be said for being the kind of guy your family can count on to show up, pay the bills, and not disappear when things get tough. Apparently, though, reliability is about as sexy as a tax audit. I've never been what you'd call a chatty guy. While Natasha could talk for 45 minutes straight about the personality differences between golden retrievers and Labradors, I was more the strong, silent type. Not because I was trying to be mysterious or brooding, though I'm told I pull off brooding pretty well, but because I genuinely believe that most problems don't need to be talked to death. Sometimes a situation just needs to be observed, analyzed, and dealt with accordingly. And observe, I did. Man, did I observe. I noticed how Natasha started checking her phone constantly, holding it at weird angles like she was protecting state secrets. I noticed how she suddenly needed to work late at the clinic 3 nights a week, which was strange considering her assistant had mentioned to Mia that things had been pretty quiet lately. I noticed how she started talking about finding herself and exploring her creative side, which, in my experience, is usually middle-aged women speak for, I'm about to do something incredibly stupid and expensive. The most telling sign, though, was how she started picking fights about the dumbest imaginable. Suddenly, the way I loaded the dishwasher was wrong. My breathing was too loud. I was emotionally unavailable because I didn't want to spend an hour discussing the deeper meaning behind her latest Netflix binge. It was like living with someone who was actively looking for reasons to be pissed off, which made me wonder what she was trying to justify to herself. Mia picked up on the tension too, because kids always do. She started spending more time in her room, headphones permanently attached to her skull. And when she did emerge, She'd looked back and forth between her mother and me like she was watching a tennis match played entirely with passive-aggressive comments and meaningful sighs. "Dad, why does Mom seem so angry all the time?" she asked me one evening while we were working on her algebra homework. Natasha was upstairs, probably on her phone again, claiming she needed to decompress from her day of telling people their cats were fat. "Your mom's just going through some stuff, kiddo," I told her, which was probably the understatement of the century. Sometimes adults get confused about what they want. "Are you confused about what you want?" Mia asked, looking at me with those sharp eyes that reminded me way too much of my own. "Nope," I said, and I meant it. I wanted my family to be happy and healthy. I wanted to keep doing work that mattered, even if I couldn't brag about it at parties. I wanted to watch my daughter grow up into the kind of woman who wouldn't take from anyone, including her old man. Simple goals, really. What I didn't know at the time was that my beautiful, restless wife had already decided that what she wanted didn't include me. She'd been busy making plans that would turn our stable, boring, reliable life into a smoking crater. And like the good engineer I am, I was about to learn that sometimes the most spectacular failures happen to the structures that look the most solid from the outside. But that's getting ahead of myself. At this point in the story, I was still the guy who thought his biggest problem was figuring out why his wife had suddenly developed an attitude about the way I folded towels. I was still operating under the assumption that we were a team, that 16 years of marriage meant something, and that whatever rough patch we were going through would work itself out if we just gave it time. Spoiler alert, I was wrong about pretty much everything. But sometimes being wrong is the best thing that can happen to a guy, even if it doesn't feel that way when your world is busy falling apart around your ears. You know how they say the past has a way of coming back to bite you in the ass? Well, in my case, the past came back with a perfectly curated Instagram feed and the kind of artsy facial hair that screams, "I peaked in college, but I'm really committed to pretending otherwise." Devin Hartman. Even his name sounds like something a romance novelist would make up for the sensitive bad boy who rebuilds motorcycles and writes poetry about his feelings. I'd heard about this jackass plenty over the years. He was Natasha's college boyfriend, the one who really understood her creative soul and probably told her she was too good for her business major while he was busy failing his way through a liberal arts degree that cost more than most people's cars. According to the Natasha Reeves Greatest Hits collection of stories I'd been subjected to over the years, Devin was this free-spirited artist type who lived life on his own terms. Man, he didn't care about material possessions or societal expectations. He was all about the experience, the journey, the authentic connection to his artistic vision. Translation? He was a pretentious deadbeat who thought having strong opinions about coffee made him interesting. But apparently 16 years of marriage to a responsible adult who paid his taxes on time and never bounced a check had left my wife feeling nostalgic for the days when her biggest worry was whether her boyfriend would remember to show up for dates he'd scheduled. Because that's exactly the kind of stability every woman dreams of, right? The whole thing started innocuously enough, like most disasters do. Natasha mentioned that Devin had found her on Instagram, and isn't that just perfect? The guy who was too cool for conventional employment had managed to master social media stalking. She showed me his profile one evening, all casual-like, as if she was just sharing an amusing blast from the past. "Look who reached out," she said, holding her phone at that particular angle women use when they want you to look, but not look too closely. Devin Hartman. Can you believe he's doing architecture now? I glanced at the screen and immediately wanted to roll my eyes so hard they'd fall out of my head. The guy's profile was a carefully constructed monument to manufactured authenticity. Black and white photos of urban decay with pretentious captions about finding beauty in the forgotten spaces. Selfies where he was clearly trying to look thoughtfully brooding while sipping coffee that probably cost more than most people spend on lunch. And yeah, sure enough, his bio listed him as a freelance architectural consultant, which in my experience is usually code for unemployed but too proud to admit it. Freelance architecture, I repeated, Because sometimes the best response is just to let people hear how ridiculous they sound. That's a real thing. Of course, it's a real thing, Austin, Natasha snapped with the kind of defensive energy that should have been my first red flag. Not everyone needs to work for some soulless corporation to feel fulfilled. A yes, because my job designing components for military aircraft that keep our servicemen and women safe was clearly just me selling my soul to the man. But sure, let's all bow down to the guy who probably spent his days sketching coffee shops that would never get built while living off credit cards and the kindness of whatever sucker was currently funding his artistic journey. Over the next few weeks, Devon's name started popping up in conversation with increasing frequency. Natasha would casually mention their reconnection, how he'd been asking about her life, her work, whether she was happy. Because nothing says innocent old friendship like a guy sliding into your DMs to ask about your marriage satisfaction levels. He's really matured, she'd say, scrolling through what I could only assume were his latest posts about the intersection of architecture and emotional authenticity, or whatever he was peddling these days. He's been through a lot. A divorce, some career setbacks, but he's really found himself, you know? Found himself, right at 38 years old. The guy had finally found himself. Most people call that having a midlife crisis and refusing to get a real job. But what do I know? I'm just a guy who's been consistently employed since graduation and never needed a spiritual journey to figure out that paying rent is generally considered important. The real kicker was when she started showing me his work. Apparently, Devon's idea of freelance architecture involved a lot of conceptual sketches and artistic renderings of spaces that looked like they belonged in a museum of why normal people can't afford housing. Lots of exposed brick, dramatically angled windows, and open floor plans that screamed, this would be impossible to heat and completely impractical for anyone with actual furniture. Look at this design he did for a coffee shop in Portland, Natasha would gush, showing me yet another Instagram post. Isn't it amazing how he captures the essence of community gathering while maintaining individual expression? I looked at what appeared to be a sketch of a room where people would be forced to sit on concrete blocks while drinking $7 lattes, and I couldn't help but think that maybe there was a reason this guy was still freelancing instead of actually building things people wanted to use. But here's the thing about being married to someone for 16 years. You develop a pretty good radar for when they're working up to something, and Natasha was definitely working up to something. The casual mentions became longer conversations. The innocent look, what Devon posted moments, became detailed discussions about his philosophy on life and art and authentic living. Then came the night she announced she was meeting him for coffee. Just coffee, Austin. We're old friends catching up. Don't make it weird. Don't make it weird. As if pointing out that married women meeting up with their ex-boyfriends who were clearly hitting on them via social media was somehow me being unreasonable. As if my 16 years of faithful marriage and steady presence in her life had somehow earned me the right to be concerned about where this was headed. But I didn't say any of that. Instead, I just nodded and went back to reading the technical specifications for a new aircraft component I was working on. Because sometimes the best way to handle a situation is to let it play out exactly the way the other person wants it to, especially when you're pretty sure they're about to learn some uncomfortable truths about themselves. What I did do, though, was call Peter Delgado. Peter was an old friend from my Air Force days who'd gone into private investigation after his military service. Good guy. Thorough, discreet, and most importantly, someone who understood that sometimes you need documentation, not because you're planning to use it, but because you need to protect yourself from people who are planning to use you. Pete, I said when he answered the phone, I think I might need your services. Cheating spouse? He asked, because Pete's been doing this long enough to cut straight to the chase. Let's just say I want to make sure I have all the facts before I make any major decisions about my future. Got it. I'll start with basic surveillance. Photos, timestamps, location data. You want the full package or just enough to confirm what you probably already know? Full package. I said because if Austin Reeves has learned anything in his 42 years on this planet, It's that when someone shows you who they are, you should believe them the first time. And when they start making excuses to spend time with their ex-boyfriend who really understands their creative soul, you should probably start collecting evidence. 3 weeks after that first innocent coffee date, Natasha asked me to sit down for what she called an important conversation. You know how people always say that? Like they're doing you some kind of favor by scheduling your emotional destruction at a convenient time. She picked a Saturday morning right after Mia had left for soccer practice because nothing says I'm about to blow up our family like waiting for the kid to be safely out of earshot. She sat across from me at our kitchen table, the same table where we'd eaten thousands of meals, helped Mia with homework, and planned family vacations that we'd never take again. The irony wasn't lost on me. But then again, I've always appreciated a good dramatic setting. If you're going to destroy someone's life, you might as well do it somewhere meaningful. Austin, she began, and I could already hear it in her voice. That particular combination of fake regret and barely contained excitement that women get when they think they're about to trade up. I need to be honest with you about something. Honest, right? Because the last 3 weeks of sneaking around, making mysterious phone calls, and coming home with that particular glow that comes from doing things you know you shouldn't be doing, that was all just practice honesty, I guess. I've been spending time with Devin, she continued, as if this was some earth-shattering revelation instead of something I'd been watching happen in real time. And I've realized that what we had, what you and I have, it's not enough anymore. Not enough. 16 years of marriage, a beautiful daughter, financial security, and a man who'd never once given her reason to doubt his loyalty or commitment. Apparently, that was not enough compared to whatever Devin had been selling her about authentic living and creative passion. I want to divorce Austin. I want to be with Devin. She said it like she was announcing she'd decided to switch grocery stores. Matter of fact, almost businesslike, as if she'd spent weeks rehearsing this moment in the mirror until she could deliver it without flinching, which, knowing Natasha, she probably had. I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw a stranger wearing my wife's face. This woman who'd promised to love me through sickness and health, who'd stood beside me when my father died, who'd cried happy tears when we bought our first house together. This woman was sitting across from me explaining why I was no longer sufficient for her happiness. And you know what I said? I understand. My lawyer will send the papers. That's it. No shouting, no begging, no dramatic speeches about how she was destroying our family for some loser who couldn't hold down a steady job. Just simple acknowledgement and next steps. Because what was the point of fighting for someone who'd already mentally checked out of our marriage? What was the point of trying to convince someone to love me when they'd clearly decided I wasn't worth loving? The look on her face, though, man, that was something to behold. Her eyes went wide like I just slapped her instead of giving her exactly what she'd asked for. She blinked a few times, opened her mouth, closed it again, and then just stared at me like I'd started speaking a foreign language. That's it, she finally managed. That's all you have to say? What else is there to say, Natasha? You've made your choice. I'm not going to sit here and beg you to reconsider when you've obviously already decided that our marriage isn't worth fighting for. But don't you want to talk about this? Don't you want to try counseling or something? And there it was, the thing that really pissed me off. She wanted the drama. She wanted the big emotional scene where I broke down and pleaded with her to stay, where I promised to change, where I gave her the satisfaction of knowing she'd completely destroyed me. She wanted to be able to tell Devin and her girlfriends about how desperate and pathetic her husband had been when she'd finally worked up the courage to leave him. Sorry, sweetheart. This particular show wasn't going to have the ending she'd been hoping for. Counseling is for people who want to save their marriage, I said, standing up from the table. You don't want to save our marriage. You want permission to feel good about destroying it. I'm not going to give you that. I went upstairs, packed a bag with enough clothes for a week, and started making phone calls. First to my lawyer, Richard Morrison, a guy I'd known since college who specialized in exactly this kind of situation. Then to a realtor friend who could help me find a temporary place to stay. Then to my company's HR department to update my emergency contact information. By the time Mia got home from soccer practice, I was loading my truck. "Dad, what's going on?" She looked between me and her mother, who was standing in the doorway, looking like someone had just ruined her birthday party. "Your mom and I are getting divorced." "Kiddo," I told her, because I've always believed kids deserve the truth, even when it sucks. "I'm going to be staying somewhere else for a while, but nothing changes between you and me, okay? You're still my #1 priority." Mia's face crumpled, and that was the moment this whole thing became real for me. Not Natasha's carefully rehearsed speech, not her obvious relief at finally being free to pursue her great love affair with Captain Authenticity. It was watching my daughter's world fall apart because her mother had decided that being happy was more important than keeping our family together. "Is this because of Devin?" Mia asked. "Because 14-year-olds are a lot smarter than adults give them credit for?" "Ask your mother," I said, kissing the top of her head. "But remember, none of this is your fault. And both of us still love you more than anything in the world." As I drove away from the house I'd been paying the mortgage on for 8 years, I caught a glimpse of Natasha in my rearview mirror. She was still standing in the doorway, but now she looked confused and maybe a little disappointed, like she'd been expecting a different kind of reaction and wasn't quite sure what to do with the one she'd gotten. What she didn't know, what she couldn't know, was that I'd spent the last 3 weeks doing a lot more than just sulking about her coffee dates with Devin. While she'd been busy planning her exit strategy, I'd been implementing mine. The house, the cars, her precious veterinary clinic, none of it was quite as secure as she thought it was. See, here's the thing about marrying an engineer. We're really good at building things that look simple on the surface, but are actually incredibly complex underneath. And after 16 years of marriage, I'd built our financial life like I build aircraft components, with multiple redundancies, fail-safes, and backup systems that most people would never think to look for. Natasha thought she was trading in a boring, reliable husband for an exciting, passionate lover. What she'd actually done was trade in financial security, a devoted partner, and a stable home for her daughter in exchange for a guy who Instagrammed his breakfast and called it art. But she was about to find that out for herself, and I was going to let her discover it in exactly the way she'd chosen to discover that her marriage was over, without any warning, without any discussion, and with absolutely no opportunity to change her mind once the consequences started rolling in. There's a special kind of hell reserved for fathers who have to watch someone else play daddy to their kid. And let me tell you, it's about as fun as it sounds. For the first month after I moved out, I got to experience the joy of hearing Mia gush about her mom's amazing new boyfriend and how different everything was now that Devin was around. "He's so cool, Dad," she told me during one of our Wednesday dinner dates at her favorite burger joint. "He doesn't make me do homework right when I get home from school. He says creativity can't be rushed, so if I want to watch TV first and do math later, that's totally fine." Oh, how wonderful. Captain Authenticity had discovered that the fastest way to a teenager's heart was to undermine every parenting principle I'd spent 14 years establishing. Because nothing says responsible adult quite like telling a kid that homework is optional and structure is for squares. "And he takes me to all these cool places," Mia continued, completely oblivious to the fact that every word was like a tiny knife to my gut. "Last weekend, we went to this amazing art gallery where they had these sculptures made entirely out of recycled materials. Devin knows the artist personally. He says, art is about seeing the world differently. Right? Because the guy who couldn't afford health insurance was definitely the person I wanted teaching my daughter about seeing the world differently. But I kept my mouth shut and nodded along because what was the alternative? Turn into one of those bitter, divorced dads who badmouths their ex and poisons their kid against their new step-parent? No thanks. I'd seen too many of those guys at Mia's school events. The ones who couldn't have a conversation about their kids' grades without taking shots at their ex-wife's new husband. The ones who turned every parent-teacher conference into an opportunity to air their grievances about custody schedules and support payments. The ones whose kids learned to dread spending time with them because every visit came with a side of drama and resentment. That wasn't going to be me. If Natasha wanted to let some unemployed wannabe artist playhouse with our daughter, I was going to let her do exactly that, because here's what I knew that she apparently didn't. Kids aren't stupid. They figure out who the adults in their lives actually are, usually a lot faster than those adults think they will. But Jesus Christ, it was hard to watch. Devin, it turned out, was everything I wasn't. Where I believed in bedtimes, he thought staying up late was honoring your natural rhythms. Where I insisted on vegetables with dinner, he was all about not creating negative associations with food. Where I made Mia earn her allowance by doing chores, he gave her money just for being awesome and told her that traditional concepts of work were soul-crushing capitalist propaganda. The guy was like a walking parenting magazine article titled, "How to Raise a Spoiled Brat While Feeling Really Good About Your Progressive Values." And Mia, God love her, was eating it up. For the first time in her life, she had an adult in her house who treated her like a peer instead of a child, who valued her opinions on everything from dinner choices to weekend plans, who made her feel like the most interesting person in the world. Devin says, "I'm really mature for my age." She told me one evening when I picked her up for our every other weekend custody time. He says most adults don't understand how much kids actually know about life, but he can tell I'm different. Yeah, I bet he could. Nothing like a middle-aged man telling a teenage girl how mature and special she is. That definitely wasn't setting off any alarm bells in my head. But the real kicker was when Mia started calling him her fairy tale dad. She didn't mean it to hurt me, I knew that. She was 14, caught up in the excitement of having someone new and interesting in her life. Someone who made everything feel like an adventure instead of the boring routine of school and chores and bedtime. But me, if that didn't cut deeper than anything Natasha had said during our divorce conversation. Fairy tale dad. The guy who showed up after I'd done all the hard work. The sleepless nights when she was a baby. The ear infections and stomach bugs, the homework battles and friend drama, the driving her to soccer practice at 7 in the morning, even when I'd been up until 2 working on a project deadline. The guy who got to be the fun, spontaneous presence in her life, while I was the one who made sure her college fund was growing and her health insurance was paid up. Devin got to take her to art galleries and tell her she was mature. I got to be the guy who reminded her to brush her teeth and asked uncomfortable questions about her grades. It was during this phase that I really started to understand what people meant when they talked about playing the long game. Every instinct I had was screaming at me to fight back, to point out that Devin's idea of financial planning was hoping his next freelance gig would cover rent, that his artistic vision seemed to involve a lot more talking than actual creating. That maybe a 40-year-old man who still used phrases like "follow your bliss" wasn't the most reliable role model for a teenage girl. But I didn't do any of that. Instead, I kept showing up. I kept taking Mia out for our Wednesday dinners and our every other weekend time together. I kept asking about school, kept enforcing reasonable rules when she was with me, kept being the steady, boring, reliable presence in her life that I'd always been. And while I was doing that, I was also doing other things. Things that Natasha and Devin were too caught up in their great love story to notice. I was training at the local Brazilian jiu-jitsu gym every morning at 5 a.m., working off 16 years of marriage weight and building back the kind of physical strength I hadn't had since my Air Force days. I was putting in extra hours at work, laying the groundwork for contracts that would set my company up for the next 5 years. I was restructuring investments, moving assets, and setting up legal protections that would keep my daughter's future secure no matter what kind of financial disaster Devin dragged Natasha into. Most importantly, I was positioning myself exactly where I needed to be for the moment when the fairy tale started to fall apart. Because fairy tales, by definition, aren't real, and reality has a way of showing up eventually. Usually when you least expect it, and definitely when you're least prepared to handle it. While Devin was busy being the cool, artistic stepdad who understood Mia in ways her boring engineer father never could, I was quietly building the kind of life that would still be there when she needed something more substantial than validation and creative encouragement. Let him be the fairy tale dad. I was perfectly content being the real one. 2 months into the Devin and Natasha show, I was 20 pounds lighter, had shoulders that actually filled out my shirts again, and was sleeping better than I had in years. There's something to be said for not having to tiptoe around someone else's emotional minefield every damn day. My new apartment was small but clean, walking distance from Mia's school, and decorated exactly the way I wanted it. Which is to say, not decorated at all beyond the essentials and a few pictures of my daughter. I was settling into my new routine. Gym at 5, work by 7, dinner with whatever takeout place hadn't disappointed me yet, when Peter called with an update that made me nearly spit coffee all over my laptop. "Your wife's been busy," he said without preamble, because Peter's never been one for small talk. 3 different hotels in the last month. Always during business hours. Always with Romeo. Credit card receipts show she's been picking up the tab for everything. Rooms, meals, his gas when they take road trips in her BMW. Road trips? I asked, though I probably already knew the answer. Weekend getaways to that artsy town up north. Couple trips to wine country. One particularly expensive weekend at some resort spa. Your girl's been funding quite the romantic adventure. I had to admire Devin's style. Really, why work for money when you can just find someone else who already has it? The guy had managed to turn my ex-wife into his personal ATM, and she was apparently so caught up in their authentic connection that she didn't even notice she was being used. "There's more," Peter continued, and I could hear the grim satisfaction in his voice. "I ran a financial background check on your boy Devin. Guy's been living off credit cards for the last 18 months. No steady income, 3 different addresses in the last year, and a couple of small claims judgments against him for unpaid debts. Real winner your wife picked there. Anything else?" I asked, though part of me wasn't sure. I wanted to know, just that he's been real active on social media lately. Lots of posts about new beginnings and finding someone who really understands his vision. Guy's practically live tweeting his midlife crisis. After I hung up with Peter, I sat in my apartment looking out at the city skyline and feeling something I hadn't expected. Pity. Not for Devin, that guy, but for Natasha. She'd thrown away 16 years of stability, financial security, and a man who'd never given her reason to doubt his commitment. All for some loser who saw her as a meal ticket with benefits. But pity wasn't going to change anything, and it sure as hell wasn't going to protect my daughter from the fallout when this whole thing inevitably collapsed. So I made a few phone calls of my own. The first domino fell on a Tuesday morning in late September. Natasha called me at work, which she'd never done before, not even during our marriage. Her voice had that particular quality that comes from someone trying very hard not to sound panicked while being absolutely, completely panicked. "Austin, we need to talk about something about the house." "What about the house?" I asked, though I already knew exactly what about the house. "I got a letter from some law firm I've never heard of. They're saying I need to vacate in 60 days because I don't actually own it." "That doesn't make sense, Austin. We bought that house together." Sweet, naive Natasha. We did buy that house together. What she'd apparently forgotten in all the excitement of her new romance was that I'd insisted on putting it in the Reeves family trust when we'd refinanced 3 years earlier, for tax purposes. I told her at the time estate planning, boring financial stuff that she didn't need to worry her pretty little head about. What I hadn't mentioned was that the trust had very specific clauses about what happened to family assets in the event of adultery and abandonment. My lawyer, Richard, had been particularly creative with that language. The house is held in trust. Natasha, I explained this to you when we set it up. The trust has rules about who can live there and under what circumstances. But I live here. Mia lives here. You can't just kick us out. I'm not kicking anyone out. The trust is kicking you out. There's a difference. This is Austin, and you know it. You can't use our daughter as leverage in your petty revenge scheme. Our daughter, right? The daughter she decided to uproot from her stable home life so she could play house with her unemployed boyfriend. The daughter who was now living with a man who thought paying bills was a capitalist conspiracy. Mia can stay wherever she wants to stay, I said calmly. She's welcome to live with me, or if she prefers, she can stay with her mother wherever her mother ends up living. The silence on the other end of the line was beautiful. I could practically hear the wheels turning as she tried to figure out how to spin this as my fault. You planned this, she finally said. You knew this would happen when you set up that trust. I planned for a lot of things, Natasha. That's what responsible adults do. 2 days later, Peter called with another update. Both cars got repoed this morning, he said, and I could hear him trying not to laugh. Apparently, your ex didn't realize the BMW and the Tesla were both leased through your LLC, not owned outright. Repo guy showed up at 7 a.m., clean and professional. Your boy Devin wasn't too happy about losing his ride, from what my contact at the repo company tells me. I could only imagine Devin's reaction to discovering that his sugar mama's fancy cars weren't actually hers. Nothing kills the romance quite like having to take public transportation to your secret rendezvous spots. How's he handling the pressure? I asked. Not great. My sources say he's been making some phone calls trying to line up other opportunities. Guy's got a real talent for sniffing out lonely women with money. Of course he did. Devin was a professional, not in architecture, obviously, but at being exactly the kind of sensitive, artistic guy that middle-aged women thought they wanted. He probably had a whole playbook, the right combination of vulnerability and confidence, the perfect balance of creative passion and financial need, the exact words to make a woman feel like she was saving him while he was really saving her from her boring, stable life. The problem was that his current Mark had just run out of resources to fund his lifestyle, and guys like Devin don't stick around when the money dries up. Meanwhile, I was getting reports from friends and neighbors about the drama unfolding at what used to be my house. Julia, Natasha's best friend and biggest cheerleader for the divorce, had apparently started asking uncomfortable questions about Devin's long-term prospects. Other friends were beginning to whisper about whether Natasha had really thought this through. The funny thing was, I didn't feel victorious. I didn't feel like I was getting revenge or proving a point. Mostly I just felt tired. Tired of watching someone I'd once loved make increasingly desperate choices. Tired of seeing my daughter caught in the middle of adult drama she shouldn't have to deal with. Tired of being cast as the villain in someone else's story of liberation and self-discovery. But I wasn't done yet. The house and cars were just the first course. The main event was still coming. And when it did, everyone was going to understand exactly what kind of man Devin Hartman really was. For months into what I'd started thinking of as the Devin disaster, I was down 30 pounds, had biceps that actually showed up in t-shirts, and was sleeping like a man who didn't have to worry about what fresh hell was waiting for him when he got home from work. My apartment had become my sanctuary, clean, quiet, and blissfully free of passive-aggressive notes about loading the dishwasher wrong or dramatic sighs about my emotional unavailability. But the best part of my new life, the front row seat I had to watching Natasha's fairy tale relationship slowly transform into a cautionary tale about what happens when you mistake desperation for passion. The phone call that changed everything came on a Thursday morning while I was reviewing blueprints for a new aircraft component that would probably keep me busy and well paid for the next 2 years. Richard Morrison, my lawyer, had that particular tone in his voice that meant someone was about to have a very bad day, and it wasn't going to be me. "Austin, we need to meet today if possible. I've got some paperwork that requires your signature, and we need to discuss the timeline for the next phase." "The clinic?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "The clinic. Everything's in order on our end. Your ex-wife is about to learn some very interesting things about business ownership and profit distribution agreements. See, here's the thing about marrying an engineer who specializes in complex systems. We're really good at building things that look simple on the surface, but have incredibly sophisticated internal mechanisms." And Natasha's veterinary clinic, her pride and joy, the business she had spent years building into the most successful animal hospital in our part of the city, was about to reveal just how sophisticated its internal mechanisms really were. When Natasha had first started talking about opening her own practice 8 years ago, I'd been nothing but supportive. Hell, I'd been more than supportive. I'd been the guy who made it possible. While she was busy studying for her veterinary boards and dreaming about helping animals, I was the one researching business loans, talking to contractors, and figuring out how to turn her dream into a financially viable reality. The problem was that veterinary school doesn't exactly prepare you for the business side of running a clinic. Natasha knew everything there was to know about treating sick animals, but she couldn't tell you the difference between gross revenue and net profit if her life depended on it. So naturally, she'd left all the boring business stuff to her husband, the guy with the engineering degree, and a head for numbers. I'd set up the LLC, structured the partnership agreements, arranged the initial funding, and handled all the legal paperwork that comes with starting a business that deals with both healthcare regulations and small business requirements. Natasha had signed where I told her to sign, trusted me to handle the details, and focused on what she did best, taking care of animals and building relationships with clients. What she'd apparently forgotten in all the excitement of her midlife crisis was exactly what she'd signed. The Natasha Reeves Veterinary Clinic wasn't owned by Natasha Reeves. It was owned by NR Holdings LLC, a limited liability company that I'd set up to protect both the business and our personal assets from potential lawsuits, regulatory issues, or other business-related disasters. Smart planning. Really, the kind of boring, responsible decision-making that had kept our family financially secure for years. The only problem, from Natasha's perspective, was that NR Holdings LLC wasn't a 50-50 partnership. It was a 65-35 split, with the majority stake held by Surprise, the person who provided the initial capital, arranged the financing, and handled all the legal groundwork for getting the business off the ground. That would be me. For 8 years, this hadn't mattered. We were married. We shared everything. And whether I technically owned 65% of the clinic or she owned 65% of the clinic was just paperwork. The profits went into our joint accounts. The tax benefits helped our overall financial picture, and everyone was happy. But adultery, as it turns out, has a way of making paperwork very relevant very quickly. The beauty of the whole thing was that I didn't have to do anything dramatic or vindictive. I didn't have to sabotage the business or interfere with her ability to practice veterinary medicine. All I had to do was exercise my rights as the majority partner in the LLC to freeze profit distributions pending a full audit of the business's financial health and operational integrity, which, translated into normal human language, meant that while Natasha could continue working at the clinic and drawing her salary as the primary veterinarian, she couldn't access any of the profits the business generated. And for a successful veterinary practice in an affluent area, the difference between salary and profit distribution was substantial. We're talking about the difference between making a decent living and making the kind of money that funds BMW payments and weekend getaways to wine country. The call came on a Friday afternoon just as I was getting ready to leave work to pick up Mia for our weekend together. Austin, Natasha's voice was tight, controlled. but I could hear the panic underneath. "We need to talk about the clinic." "What about the clinic?" I asked, settling back into my desk chair. This conversation was going to be worth being a few minutes late. "I got a letter from your lawyer. Something about profit distributions being frozen pending an audit. That doesn't make sense, Austin. It's my clinic. I built it. I run it. I make the money that keeps it profitable." "It's our clinic, Natasha. Technically, it's majority owned by me, but I never wanted to make that an issue when we were married. Now that we're divorced, I let the sentence hang there because sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is let people fill in the blanks themselves." "You can't do this. I need those distributions to live. I have rent to pay, car payments, insurance." "Actually, you don't have car payments anymore," I pointed out helpfully. "And as for rent, well, that's what happens when you choose to leave the family home to pursue other opportunities." The silence on the other end was deafening. I could practically hear the wheels turning as she tried to figure out how to spin this as another example of my unreasonable behavior. "This is about Devin, isn't it?" She finally said, "You're punishing me for being happy." Happy, right? Because nothing says happiness quite like discovering that your new boyfriend has been living off your credit cards while his own financial situation circles the drain. "This is about business, Natasha. The clinic needs to be audited to ensure all financial practices have been above board, especially given the changes in management oversight over the last few months." What I didn't say, but what she undoubtedly understood, was that Peter's investigation had turned up some interesting information about Devin's involvement in the day-to-day operations of the clinic. Apparently, Captain Authenticity had been spending quite a bit of time at Natasha's workplace, offering his creative insights on everything from office layout to client relations. He'd even convinced her to hire his friend Marcus as a part-time receptionist, despite Marcus having zero experience in veterinary care or customer service. The audit would reveal exactly how much money had been flowing out of the business to fund Devin's various projects and lifestyle choices. It would document the decline in client satisfaction that had coincided with Devin's increasing presence at the clinic. Most importantly, it would create a paper trail showing how Natasha's personal life had begun to negatively impact the professional reputation of a business that I had a majority stake in. "How long?" she asked. And for the first time since this whole thing started, she sounded genuinely defeated. "How long? What? How long will the audit take? How long before I can access the distributions again?" "That depends on what the audit finds," I said. "Could be a few months, could be longer if there are discrepancies that need to be addressed." Another long silence. "Then I can't afford to wait months, Austin. I need that money." "Then maybe you should have thought about that before you decided to blow up our marriage for a guy who thinks freelance architecture is a real job." I hung up before she could respond because there really wasn't anything else to say. The woman who told me I was boring, predictable, and emotionally unavailable was about to learn exactly how valuable boring and predictable could be when the alternative was financial chaos and uncertainty. 20 minutes later, Peter called with an update that made the whole thing even more satisfying. "Your boy Devin's been making some calls," he said. "Apparently he's been reaching out to some of his other female friends, women he stayed in touch with from his previous relationships. Guy's already looking for his next landing spot." "How do you know this?" "Let's just say Devin's not as careful about his privacy settings as he thinks he is. Social media makes my job a lot easier these days." So, there it was. While Natasha was dealing with the reality of losing her house, her cars, and now her financial security, her great love was already shopping around for his next meal ticket. The man she destroyed our family for. The guy who'd convinced her that authentic love was worth any sacrifice was getting ready to bail the moment things got financially uncomfortable. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost 6 months after Natasha had sat me down at our kitchen table to explain why I wasn't enough for her happiness anymore, I was having the best Saturday morning I'd had in years. Mia was sleeping in at my apartment after we'd stayed up way too late the night before watching terrible action movies and debating whether Die Hard counted as a Christmas film. The autumn sun was streaming through my windows. I had a cup of coffee that was exactly the right temperature, and my phone was blissfully quiet. Then it rang. Dad. Mia's voice was small, confused, and carrying that particular note that meant something had gone very wrong in her mother's perfect new world. Can you come pick me up? Like now? I was already reaching for my keys. What's wrong, kiddo? Devin's gone. Just gone. He left a note on the kitchen counter and took all his stuff. Mom's been crying for like 2 hours and she won't talk to me about what happened. A sticky note. The great love of Natasha's life. The man who'd convinced her to throw away 16 years of marriage and financial security. The artistic soul who understood her in ways her boring engineer husband never could. He'd ended their relationship with a sticky note. I had to bite the inside of my cheek to keep from laughing out loud. I'll be there in 15 minutes, I told her. Pack a bag. You're staying with me for a few days. The drive to what used to be my house, the rental apartment Natasha had moved into after the trust had evicted her, was one of those moments where you realize that sometimes the universe really does have a sense of humor. For months, I'd been watching Devin play the role of devoted stepfather, spontaneous romantic partner, and creative inspiration. I'd watched him convince my daughter that structure was oppressive and homework was optional. I'd watched him drain my ex-wife's bank accounts, funding his various artistic projects and lifestyle choices. And now, apparently, I was going to watch him disappear exactly the way guys like him always disappear. Quickly, quietly, and without taking any responsibility for the damage they leave behind. Mia was waiting for me on the front steps of Natasha's new place, a small apartment complex that was perfectly fine, but definitely a step down from our old neighborhood. She had her overnight bag and the kind of expression that meant she'd been doing some serious thinking while waiting for me to arrive. He's really gone, she said as she got into my truck. I looked in the closet where he kept his clothes, and it's completely empty. Even took the weird art supplies he kept in the bathroom. How's your mom doing? I asked, though I was pretty sure I already knew the answer. Not great. She keeps saying she doesn't understand how this happened, like she's genuinely shocked that he bailed when things got hard. Mia was quiet for a moment, then added, Dad, can I ask you something? Always. Did you know this was going to happen? There it was, the question I'd been dreading and anticipating in equal measure. My brilliant, perceptive daughter had connected the dots, and now she wanted confirmation of something that would change how she saw her mother, her father, and the whole ugly mess of the last 6 months. I could have lied. I could have played dumb, acted surprised, pretended that Devin's departure was as shocking to me as it was to everyone else. But I made a promise to myself when this whole thing started. I wasn't going to lie to my daughter, even when the truth was complicated and uncomfortable. Yeah, kiddo, I knew this was going to happen. How? Because I've been watching guys like Devin my whole life. They're attracted to stability and security, but they're not willing to do the work required to build it or maintain it. When things get tough, really tough, not just, oh no, I have to actually pay for my own coffee, tough, they find reasons to leave. Mia was quiet for a long time processing this information. Finally, she said, You could have told Mom. Would she have believed me? Another long pause. No. She probably would have thought you were just being jealous or trying to sabotage her happiness. Probably. So you just let it happen. This was the hard part. Explaining to a 14-year-old that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for someone is let them learn from their own mistakes, even when those mistakes hurt people you care about. Mia, your mom is a smart, capable woman who's perfectly capable of making her own decisions about her life. It wasn't my job to protect her from Devin, especially after she'd made it clear that she didn't want my protection anymore. My job was to make sure you were okay, and to be ready to help pick up the pieces when everything fell apart, and you knew it would fall apart. I hoped I was wrong, I said, and I meant it. I really hoped that Devin would turn out to be the guy your mom thought he was, because that would have been better for everyone, especially you. But yeah, I was pretty sure this is how it would end. When we got back to my apartment, Mia disappeared into the guest room that had become her unofficial second bedroom, and I made myself another cup of coffee while trying to process the fact that this particular chapter of my life was apparently over. Devin was gone. Natasha was alone and struggling financially, and I was fine. Better than fine, actually. The phone rang around noon. Natasha, of course. "Austin, I need to talk to you." Her voice was raw, exhausted, and carrying the kind of defeat that comes from having your worldview completely shattered in the span of a morning. "What do you need, Natasha?" "Did you know about Devin? I mean, did you know that he wasn't what he pretended to be?" "Yeah, I knew." "Why didn't you tell me?" And there it was, the question that revealed just how fundamentally she'd misunderstood everything that had happened between us. She genuinely thought that after she'd blown up our marriage, moved another man into what had been our life, and made it clear that my opinions and concerns were no longer welcome, I should have somehow found a way to save her from her own choices. "Because it wasn't my place to tell you," I said. "You made it very clear that you didn't want my input on your life decisions anymore. You wanted the freedom to choose your own path, so I let you choose it. But you let me hang myself." "No, Natasha. I let you be exactly who you are. The hanging was your own doing." The silence on the other end of the line stretched out until I wondered if she'd hung up. Then quietly, "I'm sorry, Austin, for all of it. I know that doesn't change anything, but I need you to know that I'm sorry." "I know you are," I said, and I meant it. But sorry doesn't undo the last 6 months. Sorry doesn't give Mia back the stability she lost when you decided to blow up our family. Sorry doesn't change the fact that you chose a guy you barely knew over a husband who'd never given you reason to doubt his commitment. "I know. I don't know what I was thinking." "You were thinking that you deserved better than what you had. The problem is, you were wrong about what better looked like." Later that afternoon, Peter called with the details I'd been expecting. "Your boy Devin didn't just disappear," he said. "He'd been planning this for weeks. Bank records show he's been moving money around, cleaning out joint accounts, even sold some stuff that belonged to your ex-guy. Had an exit strategy the whole time. Any idea where he went?" Phoenix already connected with a divorced real estate agent who's been posting about her exciting new relationship on social media. Devin works fast when he needs to. Jesus gets better. I did some more digging into his background. Turns out this is his pattern. He's done this same thing at least 3 times in the last 5 years. Finds a recently divorced woman with money, moves in fast, drains what he can, then bails when the resources dry up or the situation gets complicated. So there it was. The man Natasha had thrown away our marriage for wasn't just a deadbeat. He was a professional deadbeat, a con artist who specialized in targeting vulnerable women and convincing them that he was their path to authentic happiness and creative fulfillment. And my brilliant, successful, educated wife had fallen for it completely. That evening, I took me out for dinner at her favorite Italian place, the one where they knew her order by heart and always brought extra breadsticks. We didn't talk about Devin or her mother's situation. Instead, we talked about school, her friends, and her latest obsession with aerospace engineering documentaries. "Dad," she said over dessert, "I know this whole thing has been really hard on you. I just want you to know that I see what you did, how you handled everything. I mean, you could have made it so much worse for everyone, but you didn't." "Thanks, kiddo. That means a lot. Also, I'm kind of glad Devin's gone.
He was fun at first, but after a while it felt like he was trying too hard to be cool. Like he was performing instead of just being himself. Smart kid. Smarter than her mother, apparently. As we drove home, I caught a glimpse of my reflection in the rearview mirror and realized something. I looked happy. Actually, genuinely happy for the first time in months. The weight I'd been carrying, not physical weight, but the emotional weight of watching my family fall apart while trying to position myself to catch the pieces, was finally lifting. Devin was gone. Natasha would have to figure out how to rebuild her life without a con artist whispering in her ear. And I could finally stop playing defense and start building whatever came next. The quiet victory I'd been working toward for 6 months was finally mine. Not because I destroyed anyone or gotten revenge, but because I'd stayed true to myself while everyone else was busy pretending to be someone they weren't. Sometimes the best way to win is just to outlast everyone else's bad decisions. By the time Devin had evaporated from our lives like the insubstantial piece of he'd always been, I was living in a completely different world than the one I'd inhabited during my marriage. And not just because my address had changed, though. Moving into a luxury condo 6 blocks from Mia's school had definitely been an upgrade from suburban domestic purgatory. The biggest change was in the mirror. The soft, complacent husband who'd spent 16 years trying not to rock the boat had been replaced by a guy who looked like he could actually handle himself if the boat started taking on water. 30-pound lighter shoulders that actually filled out my shirts properly, and the kind of physical confidence that comes from spending 6 months learning how to choke people unconscious in Brazilian jiu-jitsu class. But the real transformation was professional. All those late nights I'd put in while Natasha was busy finding herself with her artistic soulmate had finally paid off in the kind of way that makes other engineers weep with envy. My aerospace consulting firm. Yeah, I'd gone independent about 4 months into the divorce proceedings, had just landed a $40 million defense contract that would keep me busy and wealthy for the next 3 years minimum. Turns out that being the boring, detail-oriented guy who actually shows up and does the work has its advantages in an industry where most people are more interested in talking about innovation than actually innovating. While Devin was busy Instagramming his breakfast and calling it morning mindfulness, I was designing aircraft components that would keep pilots alive in combat situations. The contrast wasn't lost on me. The condo was everything my old house hadn't been. Clean lines, no clutter, and absolutely zero decorative touches that served no practical purpose. My neighbors were mostly other successful professionals who minded their own business and didn't feel the need to comment on my landscaping choices or how often I worked late. It was quiet, efficient, and completely free of the kind of emotional landmines that had made my old home feel like a psychological obstacle course. Mia loved it, especially the roof deck, where we could sit and watch the city lights while she told me about school drama and her latest theories about aerodynamic lift principles. She'd started spending more time with me voluntarily, not because the custody agreement required it, but because my place had become the stable, predictable environment she could count on. "Dad, can I ask you something?" she said one evening while we were grilling burgers on the roof deck. It was one of those perfect fall evenings where the air was crisp enough to feel good, but warm enough that we didn't need jackets. "Always. Are you happier now? I mean, happier than you were when you were married to Mom." It was the kind of question that could have been a minefield, but coming from Mia, it felt like genuine curiosity rather than an attempt to get me to trash talk her mother. "Yeah, kiddo, I am happier. Not because your mom is a bad person, but because this life fits me better. I get to be myself without having to constantly worry about whether I'm disappointing someone or doing things wrong." "What do you mean?" "When you live with someone who's fundamentally unhappy with who you are, you start to question everything about yourself. You start thinking that maybe you really are too boring or too focused on practical stuff or not spontaneous enough. It takes a lot of energy to constantly wonder if you're enough for someone." Mia nodded thoughtfully. "Mom used to complain about you a lot to me. I mean,
When you weren't around, she'd say stuff like how you never wanted to do anything fun or how you didn't understand her need for adventure. Did that bother you? Kind of. Because the stuff she said didn't match the dad I knew. You were the one who taught me how to ride a bike and helped me build that ridiculous volcano for the science fair. You were the one who stayed up with me when I had nightmares and drove me to soccer practice, even when you were dead tired from work. Smart kid. She'd figured out something it had taken me 16 years to understand. That sometimes when people complain about you not being enough, the real problem is that they don't know how to appreciate what they have. The thing that really sealed my new life, though, was Elena. I met her at a coffee shop near my office, not because I was looking for anyone, but because they made decent coffee and had tables where I could spread out blueprints when I needed to work away from the office. She was usually there around the same time I was, always with a stack of documents and the kind of focused energy that meant serious business was getting done. Elena Marquez, legislative director for a Senate committee that dealt with defense appropriations, which meant she was smart, politically savvy, and actually understood what I did for a living instead of seeing it as some boring corporate sellout nonsense. She was also absolutely gorgeous in that understated, professional way that made you notice her intelligence before you noticed anything else. Our first conversation was about coffee. She'd asked if I minded sharing the big table during a particularly busy morning, but within 10 minutes we were discussing aerospace policy and the challenges of balancing innovation with practical implementation. She actually knew what she was talking about, had opinions based on real knowledge rather than whatever she'd absorbed from social media, and didn't seem to think that being passionate about my work made me some kind of soulless automaton. "You design the components for the F-35 program?" she asked, and I could see genuine interest in her eyes instead of the glazed overlook I usually got when people asked about my job. Some of them, the boring but crucial parts that keep the plane in the air and the pilot alive. "Boring but crucial is my favorite kind of work," she said with a smile that made me remember why I used to enjoy talking to intelligent women. Most people don't understand that the flashy stuff only works because someone sweated the boring details. We started having coffee together regularly, then lunch meetings that had nothing to do with business. Then actual dates, where we discovered that we both appreciated good food, bad movies, and the kind of conversation that could go on for hours without anyone checking their phone. Elena wasn't trying to fix me, improve me, or turn me into someone more exciting. She liked the fact that I was reliable, responsible, and genuinely good at what I did. She thought my discipline and focus were attractive qualities rather than character flaws that needed to be overcome through more spontaneous living. The night I introduced her to Mia was when I knew this was going to be something special. We went to Mia's science fair, the same one where Natasha had stood in the back looking hollow-eyed and defeated while her daughter explained her project on aerospace engineering principles to anyone who would listen. Elena didn't just politely pretend to be interested in Mia's work. She asked detailed questions, offered insights from her own background in policy work, and genuinely engaged with my daughter as an intelligent person rather than just some kid she needed to tolerate to get to the parent. "Your dad tells me you're interested in aerospace engineering," Elena said, studying Mia's display board with the kind of attention that made my daughter light up. "I want to design spacecraft," Mia said, suddenly animated in a way I hadn't seen in months. "Not just the flashy parts, but the systems that keep people alive in space." "Like father, like daughter," Elena said, grinning at me. "The world needs more people who care about keeping other people alive." After the fair, as we were walking back to my truck, Mia grabbed my arm and whispered, "Dad, I really like her. She's not trying to be my friend, but she treats me like I matter. That's way better." And just like that, I realized that I'd accidentally built something I hadn't even known I wanted. A life where I could be exactly who I was without apology, surrounded by people who appreciated rather than merely tolerated my particular combination of strengths and limitations. It wasn't the flashy, Instagram-worthy existence that Devin had promised Natasha. It was better than that. It was real, sustainable, and built on a foundation that wouldn't crumble the first time things got difficult. For the first time in years, I was looking forward to tomorrow. After Mia's science fair, I was riding high on one of those perfect evenings where everything just clicks into place. My daughter had absolutely crushed her presentation on aerospace engineering principles. Elena had been genuinely impressed and engaged with Mia's work, and I felt like I was finally living in the life I was supposed to have, instead of the one I'd settled for. We were walking toward the parking lot. Elena's hand casually linked through my arm while Mia bounced ahead of us, still buzzing from the excitement of explaining her project to judges who'd actually appreciated the complexity of her work. The autumn air was crisp. The school was emptying out in that satisfied way that comes after a successful event, and I was thinking about where to take them for dinner to celebrate. Then I saw her. Natasha was standing by the bike racks, clearly waiting for us, looking like a ghost of the confident woman who'd once told me I wasn't enough for her happiness. 8 months of financial stress, social isolation, and the spectacular failure of her great romantic adventure had taken their toll. She was thinner, but not in a good way. More like someone who'd been forgetting to eat because she was too stressed to remember basic self-care.
"Mom?"
Mia's voice carried that particular note of uncertainty that kids get when they see their parents looking vulnerable and don't know how to process it. "Hey, baby," Natasha said, and I could hear her trying to inject some warmth into her voice for Mia's sake. "You did amazing tonight. I'm so proud of you." "Thanks," Mia said, but she moved closer to me, instinctively seeking the stability she'd learned to associate with my presence. Natasha's eyes moved from Mia to Elena, taking in the easy confidence, the professional polish. The way Elena stood beside me like she belonged there. I could see the comparison happening in real time. The successful, put-together woman who'd chosen me versus the woman who'd thrown me away for a con artist with good cheekbones. Austin. Natasha said, her voice carefully controlled, "Could we talk privately?" Elena squeezed my arm gently. "I'll take Mia to get some hot chocolate from the concession stand," she said, reading the situation perfectly. "Take your time." As Elena and Mia walked away, and I couldn't help but notice how naturally they fell into conversation, how Elena treated my daughter like an actual person rather than an obligation. Natasha and I found ourselves alone for the first time since the divorce had been finalized. "You look good," she said, and there was something wistful in her voice that made me think this conversation was going to be more complicated than I'd hoped. "Thanks. You look tired." She laughed, but there was no humor in it. That's one way to put it. "Austin, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me." "Okay." "Did you always know about Devin? About what kind of person he really was? About how this was going to end?" There it was. The question I'd been expecting for months, the conversation she probably should have had with herself before she decided to blow up our marriage, but was finally ready to have now that the consequences had made themselves unavoidable. "Yeah, Natasha, I always knew." She closed her eyes for a moment like she was absorbing a physical blow. "How?" "Because I've been watching guys like Devin my whole life. They're predators, but not in an obvious way. They target women who are smart and successful but emotionally vulnerable. And they're really good at making those women feel like they're the problem for wanting stability and security." "But you never said anything. What was I supposed to say? That your new boyfriend was a con artist who was using you for money? That he'd done this same thing to other women? That he was already looking for his next target while he was still living in our house?" I shook my head. "You wouldn't have believed me. You would have thought I was just a jealous ex-husband trying to sabotage your happiness. So you just let it happen. I let you make your own choices. Yes, I documented everything, protected our assets, and made sure Mia would be okay when it all fell apart. But I didn't try to stop you from learning who Devin really was. You let me hang myself." That phrase again.
The same one she'd used on the phone after Devon had disappeared, as if somehow my failure to save her from her own decisions was the real betrayal here. No, Natasha. I let you be exactly who you are. The hanging was your own doing. She was quiet for a long time, watching Elena and Mia through the windows of the school cafeteria. They were laughing about something, completely comfortable with each other in a way that had taken Devon months to fake, and Elena had achieved in one evening. "She's perfect for you," Natasha said finally, and I could hear the defeat in her voice. "She's not perfect, but she's real, and she likes me for who I actually am instead of who she thinks I could become with enough work." Is that what I did? Try to change you? You spent 16 years being disappointed that I wasn't more spontaneous, more artistic, more willing to drop everything and chase whatever impulse struck you. You wanted me to be someone I wasn't, and when I couldn't become that person, you found someone who you thought could give you what you wanted. And he couldn't. Of course he couldn't. Devon wasn't offering you a real relationship, he was offering you a performance. The problem is performances end, and when they do, you're stuck with reality. She was crying now, quietly. The kind of tears that come from finally understanding how badly you up your own life. "I'm sorry, Austin. I know that doesn't change anything, but I need you to know that I'm sorry for all of it. For throwing away what we had, for hurting you, for putting Mia through this mess." "I know you are," I said, and I meant it. Looking at her now, I could see genuine remorse instead of the self-justification and blame-shifting that had characterized our interactions during the divorce. "Do you think?" She started, then stopped herself. "Do I think what? Do you think there's any chance we could try again now that I understand what I lost?" And there it was. The question that would have meant everything to me 8 months ago and meant absolutely nothing to me now. "No, Natasha. There's no going back because you can't forgive me. Because I don't want to forgive you. Not in the way you're asking me to." I looked toward the cafeteria where Elena was helping Mia with what appeared to be a particularly challenging hot chocolate situation. I've built a life that works for me. I'm with someone who appreciates me for who I am, not who she wishes I could be. I'm not interested in going backward. Just then, Elena's Porsche pulled up because, of course, she drove a Porsche, and of course, she looked amazing doing it. Mia was already heading toward the car, and Elena was waiting by the passenger door, clearly ready to move on to whatever came next in our evening. "That's your answer right there," I said, nodding toward the car. "I'm driving away with people who chose to be part of my life because they want to be here, not because they settled for me and then regretted it." I started walking toward the car, then stopped and turned back. "For what it's worth, Natasha, I hope you figure out how to be happy. Really happy, not just distracted or entertained. But that's something you're going to have to do on your own." As we drove away, Mia chattering excitedly about the judge's reactions to her project, Elena asking thoughtful questions about her future plans. I caught a glimpse of Natasha in my side mirror. She was still standing by the bike racks, watching us leave. And for the first time since this whole thing started, she looked like she finally understood what she'd given up. But understanding and getting a second chance are two very different things. And some mistakes, once you make them, become the new reality you have to live with. 1 year after Natasha had sat me down at our kitchen table to explain why I wasn't enough for her happiness, I was having the kind of morning that makes you believe in cosmic justice. The engagement ring I bought, Elena, was sitting in a velvet box on my nightstand, waiting for the perfect moment to make its appearance. The ultrasound photo from yesterday's doctor's appointment was tucked into my wallet. Our son, due in 5 months, already looking like he was going to have his mother's stubborn chin and hopefully his father's practical nature. But the real victory wasn't the ring or the baby, or even the fact that my consulting firm was now pulling in more money than I'd ever made as someone else's employee. The real victory was simpler than that. I was happy.
Actually, genuinely wake up every morning grateful to be alive, happy for the first time and longer than I cared to remember. Mia was thriving in ways that made my chest tight with pride every time I thought about it. She'd not only decided to pursue aerospace engineering, but she'd already started taking advanced math courses that would put her ahead when she hit college. More importantly, she'd developed the kind of confidence that comes from having adults in her life who believe in her capabilities instead of just her potential. "Dad," she'd said the week before while we were working on her calculus homework, "I've been thinking about what I want to specialize in when I get to college." "Yeah? What's caught your interest?" "Space systems engineering, like the life support systems for long-duration missions. I want to be the person who figures out how to keep astronauts alive when they're traveling to Mars." Elena, who'd been reading on the couch nearby, had looked up with that smile she got when she was genuinely impressed by something. "That's incredibly important work, Mia. The kind of engineering that literally determines whether humanity's next chapter gets written." That was the thing about Elena that had sealed the deal for me. She didn't just tolerate my daughter's ambitions, she actively encouraged them. She treated Mia like a future colleague rather than a kid who needed to be managed. And the result was a teenager who was excited about her own potential instead of just trying to survive high school. The contrast with Natasha's current situation couldn't have been more stark. Through mutual friends and Mia's occasional updates, I'd kept tabs on my ex-wife's new reality. She was working at someone else's veterinary clinic now, drawing a salary, but none of the ownership benefits she'd enjoyed when her practice was thriving. The apartment she'd moved into after losing the house was fine, but cramped. A far cry from the spacious home where she'd once hosted dinner parties for her book club friends. Those friends, incidentally, had largely disappeared once the gossip mill had finished processing the details of her divorce and Devon's spectacular exit. Turns out that being the cautionary tale about what happens when you blow up your marriage for a con artist doesn't make you particularly popular at social gatherings. But the thing that really drove home how completely her life had changed was the phone call I'd gotten 2 weeks ago. "Austin?" Her voice was carefully neutral, the way it got when she was trying to ask for something she knew she had no right to request. "I need to ask you for a favor." "What kind of favor?"